really good day. So this is the time, and Craig was saying this to me at the end of yesterday's show, when a lot of different schedules come out, not the games because we know those, but let's go down a list of a couple of things that were released yesterday, late yesterday evening or today. Fox's Big Noon Kickoff schedule. Look at those games. Texas and Michigan, Alabama, Wisconsin, Michigan and Ohio State. Of course, that's way down the road, but those are some of the Big Noon Saturday games that they will have. And it's just interesting to see. We'll show you in a minute what ESPN has coming up too.
Yeah, not surprised that Fox is going to take any chance they get to get the SEC in their draft. But Texas and Alabama being on Fox with Gus and Joel Klatt should be fun to watch. Michigan, I mean, I don't know who their quarterback's going to be, but, they got a new head coach. So maybe if this game was played a year ago, it might have been a little bit more intriguing on the outset, but it still might be because Texas rolling into the big house, something – I don't know if they've ever even played there before.
I don't know if they've ever played. I think they've played, but whether it's been in Ann Arbor or not, I know Paxton early on was a minute ago in the chat room. He's gone to go play golf. Craig, your thoughts about that schedule?
I mean, it looks fun. Those are some big-time games. I think Texas-Michigan has an opportunity to be a massive ratings grab. I mean, all three will be. Michigan, Ohio State, of course, but Texas and Michigan, I think if you were saying, let's take the two biggest fan bases, the most watched fan bases, I think – off the top of my head, they're both like top 3, top 5, at worst, I would assume, based on the size of their fan bases and the typical ratings draw that you see them get in big games. So, yeah, I think that'll be a massive, massive Saturday for Fox and for Big Noon. So, that one's I'm very much looking forward to. Although, I mean, Michigan's not the same Michigan as last. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's not even on the sidelines anymore, so that does take something out of it. But that's still the brand and the new staff, new excitement level, coming off the national title, being at home. That'll be a big deal. Alabama, Wisconsin, I mean, that's another nice matchup. I think that'll be really fun out in Camp Randall a week later. Another Big Ten SEC matchup when you start to look at those two kind of, forming whatever they might form in the future, or whatever people assume that they might form. Like, these are the types of games that you think of when you think of what those two going against each other looks like. So I think both of those are great right out of the gates. And then, I mean, Michigan, Ohio State, I mean, it's simply called the game. It speaks for itself. I don't really need to add too much to that other than no matter where both find themselves, obviously this is a year where Ohio State needs to win this game again because it's been a little bit, and certainly Michigan not just beating them but winning a national title on top of that makes it sting that much worse. So that's always going to be a big draw, and those other two will be as well. So, yeah, that's fun to see that, and to see that's kind of percolating and getting more on the radar now, the actual games themselves.
Well, one thing, Texas beat Michigan. The year before they won the national title, Vince Young had like 400 yards of total offense, 38-37 in the Rose Bowl. The year before was January 1st of 2005 that set up, of course, the run they made the next year when they had an early game against Ohio State in Columbus and won that game. So that was the only time that those two teams have ever met, was in the Rose Bowl in 2005.
Yeah, and that was the launching pad, as you said. That was the launching pad to Vince Young and that team winning the national title the next year. So that Rose Bowl was absolutely massive in the history of Texas football, not only because of what it meant at the time, but then what it led into just a year later. And to think that those two programs who were pretty much just name a category, they're probably top 10. Michigan, if not, number one, or Texas number one in some of those. I know Michigan, I think all-time wins, if you don't count, the Ivy Leagues especially, they're usually at the top of a lot of the older, going back 100 years type of rankings. And to think that with all that history, with those two respectively, to have only played one time, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's really surprising. So I'm sure that will be a note that they amplify and really play up in the lead up of just how unique this matchup is to only be occurring for the second time ever and for the first time ever in the regular season, and obviously because of that, the first time ever in Ann Arbor. So that's history making, and that'll be a lot of fun.
Here are some of the games. ESPN, the first game, a Thursday night game between North Dakota State and Colorado. Then you have Clemson, Georgia, the first full Saturday, followed by Miami and Florida, Notre Dame at A&M, and I think that's where College Game Day will probably be.
It is.
Sunday, LSU, USC. LSU and Florida State have done some great games on Sunday evenings, and then Florida State will be Monday night against Boston College, which I believe is Labor Day Monday. So there's the first weekend of what ESPN has lined up.
That Clemson-Georgia game is going to be really interesting to watch, because if there's a game that Dabo's going to, put a highlighter on the calendar to shut up Tyler from Spartanburg, I think that's the one, right there. And he can quiet a lot of doubters if he can get one over Georgia to start the season. Unfortunately for the Gators, their season of dear God, can we get a break, starts against Miami in week 1.
Yeah, I mean, Deion's obviously a draw. North Dakota State, make that interesting. They'd be America's favorite team right out of the gates if they could rattle the cage of Deion and the Buffs. But obviously they're going to be a pull until they're not. We saw that last year. They were a big pull so long as they won those first few games, and then they kind of petered out, and so did the television coverage and all that. But I think that's a great spotlight for the Buffs as a program to get their season started off and have a national slot in front of the entire country. And now being in the Big 12, there's that element of it as well, paying a little bit closer attention to what they've been doing just in terms of where they kind of fit into the bigger picture. So there's definitely some intriguing things about that game. Clemson, Georgia, Paul listed out some of the reasons as to why that's intriguing. I mean, just those two names next to each other on paper, that's two teams that have combined to win, 4 national titles here in recent years. So those are two big boys, even though Clemson right now feels like they're kind of swinging up more so than seeing eye to eye. And maybe this will be another one of those games where we kind of see just exactly where Clemson is compared to where they've been in years past. But that ought to be really fun. Miami, Florida speaks for itself. Notre Dame, A&M, super intriguing with Mike Elko now there as head coach, and Marcus Freeman and company obviously have had some success and want more. So I like that game a lot as far as being the College Game Day stop. That makes a lot of sense because that's a juicy matchup. USC, LSU, great. Boston College, Florida State. It's not the sexiest Monday night matchup to cap off the weekend. I don't really.
And that's 2 weeks after the game in Dublin?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I'll tell you this: it damn well better not be sexy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like the list is like, oh, awesome, 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 and then it's like, oh, that's cool. We'll see a conference game right out of the gates, but it's not Florida State, LSU. That's for sure. All due respect to Boston College, fill in 100 teams in that spot, it's not going to look that great after the list of games we just went over. But, yeah, that'll still be cool to see, a conference game that has some meaning right out of the gates for both of those programs. And obviously Florida State with a lot to live up to after last year.
All right, one note about Baylor. They've added yet another offensive lineman, Sidney Fugar, who comes in from South Carolina, 6'5", 325-pound offensive lineman, started 4 games last year, 3 of them early for the Gamecocks. He entered the portal. He's from Connecticut. He played at Weston, Illinois for a couple of years, and Baylor now has 4 players who have come into the portal to join their roster on the offensive line, a position that they desperately needed to fill some holes and also plug some gaps as well, and they get Fugar from South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, he's on his 3rd school, so we need a little bell for that ding of just that's the norm now. Everybody on school number 3. I don't have super expectations. Congratulations to this young man. Congratulations to the staff on landing an offensive lineman, knowing that they have a pressing need there, not just for actual starting performance, but just in general, their depth and all that comes with that. So this was a big get just for that simple purpose. But he's got a couple years to play, so hopefully he can morph into a contributor, maybe even a starter at some point. But, don't have crazy expectations. This doesn't change the trajectory by any means, but it was a need that they addressed. So, yeah, congratulations to him on his decision. And, hopefully he comes to Waco ready to work, because Lord knows they need the help and they need to work, because it's pretty clear what the message is going into this season. It's like you win or this thing's turning over. So, we'll see. But Mason Miller's done a lot in a short amount of time as far as trying to add players to that room. And so I don't know if you get optimistic when you have that many new faces, or if it doesn't really matter because you were so bad to begin with that anything new is a help. But that's certainly a room that remains in progress. But that's good to see another body added to it.
Garrett, we'll get to the wins and losses and all that later on. It may be even after Sonny Dykes. We'll do that later in this hour. Here's an interesting story. The Pac-12 has, in fact, come up with a deal for Oregon, or the Pac-2, for both Oregon State and also for Washington State when it comes to the CW, and also with Fox to broadcast those two teams' home football games. So they will be on TV. We've kind of mentioned a little bit about that.
Did we talk about this like 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, they did, but it's now official.
Yeah.
The Pac has announced it. It's inked the deal now for those two teams to have home games on the CW and Fox.
I wonder what CW's next step is in the college football world. I mean, they're trying to redo their whole brand, and when we had Jim Williams on, he mentioned that one of the good things about the CW, the benefit it has is everybody pretty much has it all over the country. Everybody's got a CW. No matter what cable you're on or whatever, if you're not on cable, if it's over the air, you can get CW. So there's some benefit to being on the CW. Obviously, there's not as much money in that as there is on ESPN or Fox or CBS or NBC, but it's still intriguing, and there can be more. I'm also waiting for the next wave of what Turner does, and we'll see how that goes out now that a lot of their stuff is streaming on Max. There's about to be this Max, Hulu, and Disney Plus kind of package that you can buy as well, which again just turns into cable again. And then what they do when it comes to sports, especially if they lose the NBA to NBC,
they're irrelevant.
Yeah, then they're going to have to maybe jump into the college football game a little bit more than they have. So
yeah, I mean possibly. I don't know how much is out there to go grab though. That's the thing now at this point.
And they are turning. True TV is going to eventually completely turn into their sports channel. So they've moved True TV stuff now to TBS. So True TV is going to be Turner Sports or whatever it's going to be. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean I don't know what kind of cabinet full of goods they have to be able to sell a whole network sports wise, but yeah, I mean I guess it's a little bit of an updated story from a week or two ago when we talked about how a number of their games had been selected to be broadcast on Fox, and I think we were talking about that is the last time we touched on this. So this is just more fleshing out of the full schedule, and good for them. I mean, the CW got football after all, and I know they had it already. They already had the ACC games, but adding a little West Coast flavor certainly can't hurt their grouping of offers. So to have Oregon State, Washington State, and the games that come with that, I think is a good deal for all parties. And I know those two being out on that island, so to speak, by themselves, you were at one point in time wondering where their games were even going to be carried. I mean, that was a legitimate question. And so now they've, over the course of a couple different stories in this last month, been able to answer all those questions, it seems like. So that's great. They're going to use the Pac-12's facilities to produce these games. So, I mean, they're still going to get use out of those and then I guess sell them off afterwards. I'm not sure what happens with all of that, but they are still going to be useful for at least this upcoming season. So that's good. And then as we know, after that, barring some information that drops between now and the end of the season, all bets are off following that. But they're shaping up nicely considering the hand that they were dealt. As far as games being broadcast and finding opponents and all that stuff, it's fallen into place. Even though I'm sure it's been quite difficult to answer all those questions as expediently as you needed to. So yeah, good for them. All
right. Also, one basketball note. This was interesting. Doug Gottlieb, who we've had on the show, men's basketball analyst. He is now going to take over the job at University of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Wisconsin-Green Bay as the head basketball coach. And one of the interesting nuggets here, and I sent him a text to congratulate him, haven't heard back because it's not official, he probably can't say anything, is that he will apparently be able to continue to do his afternoon talk show on Fox Sports. But Doug Gottlieb taking over at the University of Green Bay at Wisconsin.
I get that it's a novel idea to have a guy doing, and he does 3 hours like we do every day. So I know it's a novel idea for him to keep doing that, but I have a feeling that Doug Gottlieb's not going to be on that show most days.
Yes, a very interesting hire. Obviously, he's a polarizing name, and he's got his detractors, he's got his supporters. So, for a guy who talks a lot of basketball, I mean, sports in general, but a lot of basketball, I mean, here's here's an example of somebody actually going, like, you go coach then. It's like, all right, well, we're going to see Doug Gottlieb coach, see what that looks like, and see how all of his expertise translates. But that was certainly not a headline I was expecting to see, although I've seen his name kicked around for coaching jobs over the years, and I don't know how close it's ever really come to fruition before. But I'm intrigued by I'm not so much going to tune in now because of that, but I will, be, I guess, mindful of what they're doing a little bit more because of who the head coach is and just seeing how he does. I totally don't get the show thing. That must be like some ego right there. It's like that you just still need to be able to talk and have your platform and do all that, which I don't mean like disrespectfully. I just think, like, why else would you do that?
Yeah.
Because you don't need to. You don't. You just must really love doing it, or you love the platform, because otherwise I feel like you'd have your hands pretty full with that job, especially taking 3 hours out of your day every weekday when you could be doing any number of things for the program. So that's definitely an interesting choice that puts a little more nuance onto the hire itself. So yeah, that's very interesting to see how that goes. And I do wonder if by the end of the season he's still hosting that radio show. And shoot, if he's hosting it and they're winning, then
yeah,
he can just dunk on everybody and say, "See, I told you so." But yeah, that's a strange choice from my standpoint.
All right, let's do the wins and losses, Big 12, as we await Coach Dykes to join us on Zoom up in Fort Worth. This is from Circus Sports. Is that the one you have up? Yep. Circus Sports and Casino in Vegas. In alphabetical order, Arizona, of the teams favored or the odds that they'll have at least 6 wins or more, Arizona, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, UCF, Utah, and West Virginia. So a nice chunk of them. I think that's 9 teams out of the 16, is that right, that show that they're going to win at least 7 games or 6 games or more to be bowl eligible.
Yeah, that's a nice chunk. And look, the Big 12 is all of college football this year is going to be a land of mystery because of the
That's
just
actually
gigantic,
10. I'm sorry, 10. Yeah.
But the Big 12, is the most evenly matched league where we can't say it's top heavy. We have no idea. we have no idea. How this is going to go, how teams are going to look. And, you throw the fact that rosters are completely in flux all over the country, and, you can kind of, walk into some really good decisions or walk into some really bad ones that everybody else would have made. So it's really hard to say. Baylor at 5, I think, is about right, for right now, until we see what this new look offense looks like and what the defense looks like being called by Dave Aranda. But, there's some intrigue in this league this year about who can rise to the top the fastest.
Yeah, I don't have the full list. We got partial here.
Yeah, go to the second page.
8 and 8. Yeah, here's the second.
Okay, here's the second 8. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's
every one of them, Craig, are bowl eligible according to Vegas before the season begins.
Yeah, it's probably better when we do these in the future to do like the actual, like, not alphabetized, but like the numbers, just because you can kind of see it easier as far as like the trend of who's.
I think it is the numbers.
No, I'm talking like ordered by numbers, like 9.5 is together.
Yeah, that is.
No, you're
That's
talking about top to
Paul.
Bottom, Paul. He's talking about like.
I'm talking about
9.5.
like
All right.
the most wins expected to the lowest wins expected in order.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Sometimes we do that, and sometimes we don't. But that you're
No,
right.
I'm saying for an exercise like this, it's just it's easier to look at from my standpoint. But yeah, I mean it's cool to look at, and there's a lot of interesting tidbits you can take from all these. The one I saw earlier was slightly different than this, and
Well, we got that one too.
okay, well, I
Brett
guess let's look at that.
McMurphy from Action Network HQ. Here are the teams, and they have them from top to bottom based on number of wins. K-State, Utah, and then Kansas, Arizona, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and TCU, Texas Tech, UCF, all in a huge clump at 7.5. West Virginia, and then the cutoff with Baylor, Cincy, Colorado, ASU, BYU, and also Houston at under 6 wins.
I'm willing to bang the over on West Virginia. I would. And I'll take under on Oklahoma State and everything else I don't want to talk about right now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
You're going to take the over on West Virginia and Mike Gundy.
And West Virginia, I would take the under on Mike Gundy.
Is there any particular reason why you're refraining from anything else?
I just no. I mean,
or you just don't know. Like that's
I just
fine
don't
too.
know as much. But I've formulated my opinions about them a little bit better. And I
gotta hope wet blanket's not watching.
I know I keep doubting. I am just underwhelmed. Like, I think a second year of Alan Bowman's not going to be great. I think that he's easy to figure out. And Ollie Gordon's fantastic, and they've got really good wide receivers. I just think that a second year with a seventh-year quarterback that's not going to get any better, to me, is not going to help them.
What if he's the same?
I think that's the problem. I think if he's the same,
I'll take the hell out of over on Oklahoma State.
I know most people will, and I think Gundy's fantastic.
That's fine.
But
no, I'm just saying I'll take the over on Oklahoma State.
I'm a huge doubter into I don't like the seventh-year quarterback thing. I don't know. I want people on the up.
Okay.
And he's not on the up. Like, this is his last year of playing organized football.
It's been like this, and so he's right here now.
Yeah.
We'll see if he
So
goes
I just think
sideways or up or down. Okay.
Yeah, I just think it's that's what I was talking about, just the order. I think it's just easier to look at this, kind of like separate them from who the contenders are versus the those who are doubtful to make bowl games, which, I know Houston with the coaching change, I can understand that to some extent. If BYU's only around the 4.5 mark in regular season, that's really bad news, you would think, for Kalani Sitake. Not how you've wanted this Big 12 tenure to start off with, so that's definitely something to eye. The low expectations out in Provo, but I mean, we could dissect this. I mean, Baylor at 5.5. That's where they are in every book, basically, because they are a borderline bowl team. Colorado at 5.5. I'm sure that'll be really intriguing for a lot of people. If they were to be around that mark, I think that's obviously going to be massively disappointing if you're in Boulder, Colorado. Not what you're hoping for in year number 2, but I mean, just we could go through the entire summer and unpack these one by one, because there's so many teams, though, in each league. It's hard to run them all down. But I think it's pretty clear that K-State and Utah are kind of separating themselves as the favorites and a lot of eyes nationally. And then, there's KU and Arizona most of the time pulling up in 3 and 4. So I think that's pretty much established itself that those are kind of the favorites, with an Iowa State or an Oklahoma State as those teams you say, they could get in the mix as well. I think beyond that, everybody else is kind of more of a pipe dream that some things would have to break their way or just some big surprises. But, that top group seems to have really, it's not set in stone, but it's pretty close to it at this point. And K-State, Utah, I think would be the logical choice for most people on paper to be that matchup at the end of the year.
We'll do this all summer long. And Garrett, we're still not connected yet with Coach Dykes?
I think we're getting it right now. Hang on.
Okay, all right. So one of the interesting notes is, of course, with Colorado, that start they had last year, they ended up going, 4-8 at 5.5. Somebody wants you to bet that they're a bowl team, whether it's Cincinnati, Baylor, or Colorado. And there we are with